What sort of appetite do you have for the unknown? Now, there's uncertainties when renovating. We really can't escape that. The general recommendation is a 10 to 20% contingency. 20% seems incredibly high. We've never needed to go near that. Clause in the contract ultimately where contract value goes over by 14%, with variations and the like, the client can opt out of the contract. You'd be silly to unless the builder, you're having a terrible relationship with the builder. But anyway, that's there for a purpose. That's some illustration. 20% sounds crazy. 10% should be very comfortable unless there are anomalies. Don't get me wrong, anomalies, they do exist. But I encourage everyone to get your project really well documented in the contract before you're signing, before you're going. Everything's selected, the scope of work clear. Sure, there may be some things that you do decide after a certain point, but don't make that like crazy amounts of things. One conversation I had recently with a client, value management's a common skill that we need to have as builders. And it's common that once we get out of the ground, there's going to be much less potential for the anomaly of site conditions to cause variations. We're much less likely to find rock or asbestos buried or structural issues or site issues under the ground. That's where you're most likely going to find them. In a renovation, of course, you'd add demolition to that. You'd expect you'd be demolishing first and then doing groundworks and on and on. But basically by the time that slab is down, you should be expecting you're much less likely to find issues. So you found no issues to that point, excellent. This isn't advice. Get legal advice on this, get professional advice. But you may be more likely to dip into that contingency post foundations, provided all other potential areas of risk have been examined. We've just recommended to a client that, is kind of, everyone's tight on budget. Everyone's at the top. No one is comfortable within budget. That's the way of the world. So we've got each joinery item nominated. And so that client's going to make a decision once that slab is down, whether or not they will do the joinery in the bedrooms, wardrobes and desks set up for the kids. Makes sense. If they do face great challenges in the getting out of the ground, they may put that on hold and do that in a couple of years' time. And for a new home, you should expect around a 5% contingency. And again, this is expecting everything is buttoned up. You might go to 10% if you may have some riskier ground conditions, soil conditions, or infrastructure conditions. So somewhere between 5 and 10% for a new home, and for a renovation, 10 to 20% contingency will keep you out of trouble. But again, renovations, extensions, there are more uncertainties, so just be aware of that.